Good evening and welcome to Have I Got News for You, and a desperate attempt to match the viewing figures of Charlie Dimmock's Garden Army. This week, none of us will be wearing a bra. In the news this week, John Prescott's concern for the environment is questioned once again as he takes his baby granddaughter round the park. There's a boost for the Irish peace process as the IRA reveal the whereabouts of Shergar. And in Regent's Park, London Zoo's most talented monkey does his impression of William Hague. On Ian Hislop's team is a chef and former professional footballer who realised he was in the wrong profession when he asked for his half-time oranges to be served caramelised with a raspberry parfait, Gordon Ramsey. And with Paul Merton tonight is an author who, as a 17-year-old, wrote to the Bromley and Kentish Times saying that he'd do anything without pay. So tonight we're delighted to help him finally achieve that ambition. Francis Wheen. Round one remains unchanged in spite of popular demand. Ian and Gordon, your amuse-bouche.
That's French cows eating merde. There's Nick Brown talking merde.
So it's the confirmation of the French ban on British beef. Arrogant bastards.
So you disapprove?
Slightly.
Right. Will you be handing back your Michelin stars? And
I can't quite understand what all the fuss is about, because the French don't want our beef because they say it's unsafe. We don't want their beef because French cattle don't know the difference between a feed trough and a public lavatory. So the solution is we eat British beef, they eat French beef, everyone will be happy. I don't know why we have to go to war over it. It seems a bit bizarre. And yet now we're having to boycott all these French imports. Frank Lambert, especially Frank Lambert.
And while we're about it, we might as well tell the Danish we don't want any more of their pastries as well. I'm done with it.
yes. I'm not sure they're actually from Denmark, Paul. So how is...
Well, they're called Danish, Angus.
Yes, it's not quite that simple.
Well, explain it to me then.
Have you come across French windows at all? Do you think they'll lose a lot of money from the truffle season and things like that if we don't buy their...
I think there's going to be a
restaurant would serve truffles, wouldn't they? Normally,
sure. Although at the moment we've got truffles from Alba, which are Alba,
right?
Italy.
Right. Thank you. I knew that.
You thought it was in Albania, didn't you?
The French attitude has meant a field day for Britain's tabloids, the Daily Star leading with "Why we ate 'em," before listing 21 reasons to dislike the French, although they're obviously struggling a bit by the time they reach the last one. Their road signs are in kilometres to give the impression the country is bigger than it is. Paul and Francis, your bill.
This is the House of Lords, presumably?
No, it's the Lily Savage lookalike contest. Oh, look, Saga Holiday. They're going to vote.
And what have the Lords had to submit in order to prove their worth to the community?
Oh, little manifestos saying why they should be allowed to stay.
The equivalent of those things on the back of the Weetabix packet. I would like to win a hereditary peerdom. And you have to complete it in 75 words. Some of them have written duty. Some of them have written, I'm very interested in country matters.
Oh, and Lord Monckton, Viscount Monckton, said he wanted to stay in the House of Lords to put through a bill saying that all cats should be muzzled when they go outside so they won't torment little birds. It's his main plank of his manifesto.
But then you should muzzle birds to protect little worms. and then muzzle worms to protect things we haven't even discovered yet.
They should have known that you actually only need 3 words out of 75 to stay in. You just write, I love Tony. You're in.
Under the rules of the bill, Lords wishing to remain have to write a 75-word statement. Bad news for John David Clotworthy, White Melville Foster Skeffington, Viscount Masserini and Farrard. As once he's put his name at the top and signed it, he'll only have 4 words left. Ian and Gordon.
It's a Ferris wheel.
That is the new Millennium Mile High Club.
That's a Spanish protester.
Extremely upset, protesting against the dam built in the country through India and through Spain.
Yep.
I think they stayed up there for 2 days.
They sent a policeman up there finally in full climbing gear, and he went up and said, "Good evening, what are you doing up here?" And they said, "We're protesting." And he said, "Is it against the Chinese?" And they said, "No." And he said, "Oh, that's all right then."
So when is the Millennium Wheel going to be, what's it actually called? The London Eye, isn't it?
Isn't it the British Airways London Eye?
That is its official title,
I
yes.
just thought I'd put the free advert in,
Right.
in case I ever need an upgrade.
It doesn't matter which part of the wheel you're on, you get to the top eventually anyway. Doesn't matter.
It looks rather good, the wheel. I think it looks quite amazing.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Unlike the dome, it's got no point at all. That's the point of it. It's just a wheel. It's stupid. It goes round.
Takes about 45 minutes to go round, apparently.
Yes, it goes at 1.5 miles an hour, just slightly faster than all the traffic around it.
Yeah, to be honest, you don't want it going at about 80 miles an hour, do you? Not really.
So it is the environmental group who climbed the new Millennium Wheel in order to protest about dam building in Spain and India. Do you have any sympathy for these people? You were arrested, weren't you, recently?
Ian? Yeah, supposedly I got upset with a shape of a banana parfait.
What, and the parfait complained?
No, the customer complained.
The custom complained?
Yeah, it wasn't round enough.
Right.
And you were arrested for that? God, they're tough on chefs, aren't they?
Tough on chefs, tough on the causes of chefs.
Who was allegedly assaulted?
Oh, some pastry chef that couldn't sort of, coincide with one's individual standards.
Right. And he's sitting up taking light refreshment now, is he?
No, funny enough, he's left the country.
Has he? Yes, surprise, surprise. It is, yes, anyway, the environmental group who climbed the new Millennium Wheel. According to the London Evening Standard, the protesters struck at dawn, evading low-level security, or Bob, as he's more frequently known. And finally, Paul and Francis.
That's Tracy Emin, I think, isn't it?
Is that her there? This is the Turner Prize, isn't it? That's is it called Bed?
My bed.
My Bed.
My bed, yeah.
These are two, I think they're Japanese sort of performance artists who wrote slogans across their bodies and then jumped up and down and had a pillow fight. And they were arrested by 2 security men who also turned out to be performance artists. And they were taken away to a police station, which wasn't a real police station, it was made out of fiberglass. And it was a winner of the Turner Prize in 1989. And the Japanese performance artists were deported back to Japan, which was not the real Japan, it was made out of bed linen and sort of scale of Japan.
It's a very unpleasant exhibit, isn't it?
Soiled and stained were the words I saw in the report.
And it does symbolise something, according to Tracy.
Gullibility.
And Tracy's previous exhibits, do you remember? There were 1 or 2.
Well, there was the one listing everyone she'd ever had sex with. That was a major...
It was sewn into the canvas of a
yes,
tent.
a tent.
Do you know who bought that eventually?
Charles Saatchi.
How much?
50,000?
£40,000, yes.
Well, he was one of the names. No, he wasn't.
So who were these protesters that we caught a glimpse of there?
Well, I think they were Chinese, weren't they, rather than Japanese? But they'd been art students, and they said that they felt she was too conservative, not avant-garde enough, and they wanted to make it more fluid. Though actually,
Yeah, so they did complain, though, that they were prevented from having critical sex. That was their complaint.
Critical sex?
Critical sex.
Oh, we're all familiar with that, aren't we? Is that it?
The artists actually entitled their piece of performance art, 2 naked men jump into Tracy's bed. This was soon followed by another piece of performance art, 2 security guards kick the shit out of 2 naked men. Which brings us to the end of this opening round, and if you don't want to know the scores, look away now. So, 4 all, and still having to play. Round 2 this week pitches us headlong into the only world that makes French cattle feed seem wholesome, tabloid journalism. One belter per team, Ian and Gordon. The framing of a minister.
Geoffrey Robinson, the former Paymaster General. Everyone says he's got a photo of an unnamed senior cabinet minister whose name begins with Peter and ends with Mandelson.
Although, as you say, no one actually knows who it is.
With some teenager, but then Geoffrey Robinson says, I haven't got this photo and I wasn't releasing it anyway. And no one can work out where this story came from. I expect Francis knows because he knows everything, but...
Do you know Peter Mandelson?
Yes, I do, yes.
Right, okay.
But luckily no photographers have been around to record our encounters.
What exactly do you mean by that?
This photo, I haven't seen it yet, so this could be the one.
Well, it could be you and him.
It's possible. Though the person was described as a teenager, so I think I'm in the clear.
Right. What were you doing with Peter Mandelson?
He's a very friendly chap. There was all a silly misunderstanding. There was an event a few years ago, long time ago now, really, at a party where he just greeted me in his usual affectionate way. Very affectionate. And people jumped to the wrong conclusion. And then about 8 years later, it turned up in Punch magazine, I think, world exclusive, Mandelson Snogs Wheen. And it said this was at a publishing party given by Faber and Faber, which it wasn't actually, but never mind. But they said it was, and they said, but to judge by their behaviour, it should have been Mills and Boon.
And it was just an innocent, full-on tongues French guy. Yes, and it all revolves around the memoirs of Robinson, which he claims the government are trying to suppress. What kind of details might it include, for example?
How Tony played tennis at my house. Because he always lent Tuscan villas to people.
Yeah, but we've all had freebies from Geoffrey Robinson, for heaven's sake. No, he invited me to Euro 96, the semi-final, England-Germany at Wembley. I'd never even met him at that stage. It was a phone call saying Geoffrey Robinson wondered if you'd like a ticket to the England-Germany game at Wembley.
And you have to say yes, really, don't you?
I sent him a thank you letter afterwards. He then invited me to a party. One thing led to another.
What about your mortgage at the moment? How's that?
It emerged this week that Geoffrey Robinson has pictures of a certain senior cabinet minister in a compromising position, although when the Sun reported the story, they were careful to state that the allegations do not disclose the identity or sex of the minister. In fact, they had no clues as to who it might possibly be. Paul and Francis, www.eggs.com.
Is this the story that came up at the weekend about the man Ron Harris, the American who wants to sell models? Female models are going to sell their eggs over the internet for those who want to have beautiful babies.
Ron's justification is that this is the first society that we live in to truly comprehend how important beauty is. And we can see Ron here.
Are those the eggs he's selling behind? My biology's not too hot, but I think they're a bit big.
They might be right behind him.
And who else has gone online this week and admitted their computer ignorance for an extra mark?
Tony.
Yeah.
Well, he says he's computer ignorant, but he went to the Sun, to their bun.com site, and actually he did very well, because it said click on icon, so he looked at the photograph himself and clicked on it.
8 eggs belonging to beautiful models are already on offer. There would be more, but apparently the rest have already been fertilised by Mick Jagger. According to The Mirror, one 25-year-old brunette reveals she has a 34B bust and a 79-year-old grandmother. Well, something for everyone there, I think. Which, inconceivable nonsense, means at the end of this cycle, it's Ian and Gordon who are going down the tube, trailing as they do 6-7. Round 3 is both Odd One Out and Next. Paul, your men of the moment are Lawrence Dallaglio, Kate Winslet, Snow White, and the Queen's Corgis.
Did it do with drugs?
It might be.
Because Snow White was sort of drugged, wasn't she, in the story, the poisoned apple. So that could be a drug, couldn't it? You know, sort of poison drug. Lawrence, according to the News of the World, he boasted that he'd been taking cocaine and ecstasy, which he later said, no, I was just making it up just for chatting away. And the corgis, they've been drugged as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm afraid yes is not the right answer.
It could be in an ideal world.
Yes, which this... The answer is that they have all had their food spiked, except Lawrence Dallaglio, who claims his drink was spiked by a journalist.
What was Kate Winslet's?
This was
story?
during a cast meal during the filming of Titanic.
What was it spiked with?
It was their lobster chowder that was spiked with angel dust.
Really? That's like that instant whip stuff, isn't it? Strawberry, vanilla and chocolate. No matter how you made it up, there was a bit of powdery bit. That was really old. Do you knock that up, Joel Gordon, if you get busy?
And the corgis?
Somebody didn't like the corgis and decided to poison them. It was a spaniel with a grudge.
It was actually an amusing jape by a footman. He put alcohol in their food.
A pissed corgi.
Yeah. The palace sources first realised that the corgis were drunk when one of them tripped over Princess Margaret. Newly married Kate Winslet had her food spiked during the filming of Titanic. She recently said, "Look, I burp, I fart, and I don't necessarily shower every day," although the vicar would have been happy with a simple "I do." Francis, Stephen Byers,
Oh, yeah.
Karl Marx, Alan Milburn, and Peter Mandelson.
In the picture of Peter Mandelson, has the teenager been airbrushed out of the photograph?
Well, Karl Marx is the only one I've written a biography of. That's the short answer.
Yes, good plug.
Mendelssohn was a Marxist briefly in his youth. He was in the Young Communists. And Byers and Milburn were both Trotskyists in their youth. So the odd one out is Marx, because he said that he wasn't a Marxist.
Is the wrong answer.
It was a good one, though.
Mendelssohn shaved off his moustache. Stephen Byers shaved off his moustache. Karl Marx actually did shave off his moustache and beard at the very end of his life. Alan Milburn is the only one who hasn't shaved off his facial hair.
It is terribly close to being the right answer, but in fact wrong.
That'll be because you've done the research wrong and you've done Marx as the only one who hasn't shaved it off.
You didn't know the Marx.
Well, he was the only person who was famously bearded, whereas the others shaved off their moustaches in order to get into the cabinet.
So you're arguing with the biographer of Karl Marx that he's wrong and you say you're right?
Well, as far as I'm aware, Karl Marx didn't shave it off in order to get into the cabinet.
They shaved off his moustache as well as the beard.
To get into the cabinet?
Yeah.
Into the current Labour cabinet?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have Marx in the present cabinet anyway, whether he was alive, dead, shaved, unshaved.
No, obviously, because he's a socialist. So he is the odd one out. He was famously bearded, which fortunately none of us around here have ever been, apart from Paul.
It does look like me, doesn't it?
All the others shaved off their facial hair in order to get into the cabinet. This is what Peter Mandelson forcibly removed. This is what Alan Milburn sacrificed. This is what Stephen Byers very sensibly erased.
No, he's got the Groucho Marx kit there, isn't he? The glass has come off with the moustache. And the teeth, by the look of it.
Ian, Christopher Columbus, the Lydians, Tintin,
The Lydians.
and 2,000 homing pigeons. Yes, the Lydians.
2,000 homing pigeons got lost in a storm, in a freak storm. So I think it's storms, because Columbus was always getting lost in storms. Tintin and the Big Storm. That's a particularly fine book.
Very good book.
And the Lydians, I would guess, got lost in a storm, possibly on the way to Troy. So everybody got lost in a storm, but only the birds didn't come home.
How right do you think that answer is?
I think that the clue is with the pigeons, though, because didn't 2,000 pigeons with the last eclipse that we had a couple of months ago, they disappeared over the Atlantic because they're still flying along. Oh, it's gone dark, where are we? They fell into the sea. And Tintin, isn't there a Tintin story where he's in Africa and to prove...
South America.
South America.
And he's been captured.
Uh-huh.
by the natives. And he knows, or calculus tells him, that there's a solar eclipse coming. So he then says, I will show you my power, I shall make the sun disappear. And it does, and they all fall down and worship him. And I think you'll find that Columbus, on his voyage, on one of his voyages, half his crew mutinied or panicked because there was a solar eclipse. So Tintin's the only one who's benefited from a solar eclipse, and all the others
Have suffered.
Suffered from it.
It's a terribly good answer, but not quite right. The answer is that they were all saved by an eclipse, except for thousands of racing pigeons who got lost during the recent one, as you mentioned.
Do we get a point there?
Yes, you get a point, so well done. And Gordon, did you enjoy the eclipse or did you ignore it?
I think it was in the middle of service, actually, so I think it came early in the morning and we were far too busy to sort of stand outside gazing up at the
It was 11 in the morning. How many customers have you got in your restaurant at 11 in the morning, Gordon?
11 o'clock in the morning is time for staff lunch.
What do they get?
McDonald's?
No, something nice like some beautiful toast and cheese maybe for service. Something not too heavy because obviously you've got to move around a lot. Service is very difficult, it's very hectic.
And you don't want to spend too much on staff lunch, do you? Bit of toast, that'll fill them up.
You obviously can't interrupt having toast in order to watch an eclipse, which only happens over definitely 1,000 years. In 430 BC, a huge army of Median warriors stood poised to crush the Lydians when the skies went dark and the leader cried, "Behold, it is a mighty portent from the gods above, signalling that we should lay down our arms and live in peace." Oh, hang on, it's brightening up again. And finally, in this round, Gordon, Marco Pierre White, the Young Conservatives, chef from South Park, and the AA.
The AA, that's not AA Gill Incognito, is it?
Your mate, AA Gill.
Yeah, my dear friend.
What did you do to AA Gill? I can't remember. It's something violent.
I asked him politely to leave.
Your restaurant.
That's right.
Right.
He was
Why?
with Joan Collins, wasn't he? Which is reason enough.
True.
Why did you ask him to leave?
Well, he was just being rather rude and sort of, very obnoxious in his normal fashion.
You want to keep that sort of thing in the kitchen, don't you?
Well, teamwork.
Yeah.
Is it to do with them reinventing themselves or packing things in? Because the Young Conservatives have been closed down. They've renamed themselves Conservative Future, or something rather odd, optimistic title.
It's not the right answer, no. It does involve the renaming of the Young Conservatives.
Well, that was CFUK, they tried to call it, until they were stopped by the French Connection.
Yes, why?
Well, because French Connection has a copyright on the letters F, C, U and K in whatever order they appear, apparently.
That's part of the answer. It's something that Marco Pierre White was in the news quite, well, this year about.
Oh, he was sued for passing off, wasn't he? Because the pictures in Quo Vadis, well, if you call them pictures, look very much like Damien Hirst's, but actually they're by Marco, and they had a great lawsuit over.
But you'd never know, because they're equally terrible. Is there a lawsuit against the chef in South Park?
For
obscenity?
So he's the only one who hasn't been sued for passing off?
I think I can probably give you one for this. They've all been accused of plagiarism, except for Chef, who is the subject of a copyright infringement case in the UK. The AA has been caught plagiarising maps which were originally drawn by Ordnance Survey. According to one report, sometimes the map makers deliberately miss out apostrophes in place names or add a stylistic flourish to the end of a road. Must be one long crazy riot in that office. Which cheap imitations mark the end of this recycled material, and it's Paul and Francis who look to be the genuine articles, leading as they do 11-6. And so to the round, which can only be regarded as the last, in which the usual show of half-exposed headlines mingle with one or fewer from this week's guest publication, France's top culinary masterpiece, Le Chef, Le Magasin des Chefs, hot off the press. And if it isn't, send it back. So, allez-y. Charles Watt on Blair's backside.
Beats out the theme tune to Match of the Day.
Dandruff.
None of it. Not sure what you're suggesting.
Charles Kennedy.
Charles Kennedy on Blair's backside, no. Charles a carbuncle on Blair's backside. This is a reference to Charles' absence from the Chinese state banquet last week. According to one government minister, it is not Charles' job to offend the Chinese. That's his father's job. Next, le roast beef, a what?
Dangereux.
De merde.
No.
Potillon escapade.
Is that Spanish?
I just made it up. You speak Spanish and I didn't even know it.
La solution is...
So what? Solution.
Overpopulation, probably.
Next, pig saved what?
Bacon, must be.
Is it enough coupons for the electric kettle?
Penalty.
Bacon was, in fact, the right answer.
It's bacon, perhaps.
This is Eric Nicholson, who has a pig's heart valve transplanted. The first meal they served me in hospital was roast pork, and to my amazement, I just threw it all up, he said. I don't think it'll amaze anyone who's eaten hospital food. Next, what for the hairless?
Hope. Hair dry with no motor.
It's a pill called Propecia,
Yes.
alopecia or something. It's a sort of Viagra for the follicles.
Yes. Hope, yes, is
was
the right
hope, wasn't
answer. Very good. And lastly, tomate farci au crabe riz soufflé et bouillon au quoi?
Oh, excrément.
Oh,
Cocoa.
Au calcutta, no. Good guess. It's a French drink, actually.
Oh,
Pernod.
Dubonnet.
No, could be here for a while, couldn't we?
oh, Orangina.
No, it is, in fact, sounds far more disgusting. A bouillon au noix poire.
Yeah, vermouth.
Is that the sort of thing you'd knock up of an evening?
Nice velouté nolly pois.
I was talking to Ian.
Oh, sorry.
Which stabs in the dark and indeed back mark the end of this bloody contest, and the sodding result is that this week's Cowdy Custards are Ian and Gordon with 7, while this week's Brave Hearts are Paul and Francis with 13. And I leave you with news that in Westminster, another hereditary peer arrives at the House of Lords to prove his suitability for modern government. At the Monsanto laboratory in Hereford, the world's first genetically modified dandelion claims its second victim. And finally, after 4 years training to join China's elite Red Guard, Private Kim Lee just failed the final parade inspection. Good night.
There are ghostly goings-on in Dangerfield in a couple of minutes on BBC One. Well, next up here on BBC Two, Crichton makes a big mistake with his time wand in Red Dwarf.
On one of his regular